My name is Claire Sutton. I am 34 years old. For most of my adult life, I was the sister who handled things, the one who made the calls, confirmed the appointments, organized the logistics, and never once asked to be thanked for it. Then one afternoon at my sister's baby shower, an event I had planned entirely, from the catering to the photo display to the centerpieces, she stood up to address the room and referred to me as the sister who helped set up.
I didn't cry.
I didn't leave. I walked to the center of that room and made a single announcement that ended a decade of invisibility in about 45 seconds. What I said and what happened in the weeks that followed is a story about what it costs to be reliable in a family that confuses reliability with expendability. But before I get to the shower, I need to tell you about a desk. Before I go any further, if this story is already landing somewhere familiar for you, go ahead and hit subscribe. Drop your city and state in the comments right now because I want to know where you're watching from and I want to know you're here. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to Ohio, to a family that looked perfectly fine from the outside, and to the desk. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of city that has everything a city needs and somehow still feels like it's apologizing for itself. Our house was a colonial on a cul-de-sac, 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed mowing, a garage my dad used as an office until he left.
Fine. Not warm. Just fine.
My mother, Linda, ran the household on a combination of structure and carefully managed appearances. She kept a calendar on the refrigerator with everyone's activities color-coded in felt tip marker. Mine was blue. Brooke's was red. Red always seemed to have more on it. I noticed that early. I also noticed that when I mentioned it once, I must have been 11, my mother laughed. Not a mean laugh. Worse. A dismissive one. Then she said, "You always have plenty going on, Claire," and turned back to the stove. That was it. That was the pattern. In miniature right there in that kitchen. My sister Brooke is 4 years younger than me, and she came out of the womb already knowing how to be loved. Blonde where I was dark, effortlessly social where I was careful. She wasn't cruel. I want to be precise about that because I've had a long time to think about it. Brooke wasn't a villain. She was a person who had simply never been required to consider what things cost other people. The family structured itself around her gifts without ever deciding to. It just happened, the way furniture arranges itself around the biggest piece in the room. My grandmother, Nora, was different. She lived 40 minutes away in a house that smelled like cedar and coffee and something floral I could never name, her hand lotion. I think she bought it at the drugstore and rubbed it in every evening. Her house had a writing desk in the study. A heavy oak roll top, the kind you don't see anymore, with a dozen small compartments inside and a slight warp in the top left corner from some long ago water damage. Nora wrote letters at that desk. Real letters, in cursive, on paper she kept in a shallow drawer. She wrote to people she hadn't seen in years. She wrote to me, sometimes, even though I only lived 40 minutes away. When I was 14, sitting at that desk while she wrote a letter behind me, I was doing homework or pretending to, she said, without looking up, "This will be yours someday, Claire. You're the only one in this family who understands that writing things down is how you hold on to them." I didn't know what to do with that. I said, "Okay, Grandma," and went back to my worksheet.
I didn't understand it yet.
Brooke was in the living room watching television. She didn't care about the desk. She had never sat at it. But years later, when Nora died and the house was cleared and the furniture was distributed, the desk ended up at Brooke's. It sat in her home office in Columbus, holding tax documents and Amazon returns and the administrative overflow of a life too busy to be organized. No one in my family acknowledged the promise had ever been made. I didn't ask for it. I had learned early that asking for things in my family produces a specific kind of lecture about materialism, about not being the only person with feelings about the importance of generosity. So I said nothing. I filed it away. I let it sit in Brooke's office and tried not to think about what it meant. Mrs. Evelyn Cross taught 11th grade English at my high school, and she had a habit of standing at the front of the room and reading aloud with her eyes closed. Not performing, just listening. She wanted to hear the words in the air before she talked about them. I thought that was the strangest thing I'd ever seen until I tried it myself. She noticed me the way certain teachers do, not because I was exceptional, but because I was watching. You're an observer, she told me once after class, handing back an essay I'd written about my grandmother. The essay was technically about a canning jar. The best writers usually are. They spend so long watching that when they finally speak, people actually listen. I was 16. I did not feel, in any meaningful way, like someone who would one day make people listen. But I wrote the sentence down in my notebook. I kept that notebook. When I was in my mid-20s, struggling through the dissolution of my marriage, a quiet, exhausting kind of dissolution, the kind where two people simply run out of things to say to each other, I reached out to Mrs. Cross. She had retired by then. She lived in Asheville, North Carolina, in a farmhouse with a porch that faced a ridge of Blue Ridge Mountains she called the backdrop, as though she'd installed them herself. She wrote back the same day. Come when you're ready. The guest room has decent light. I didn't go then. I wasn't ready, but I remembered the offer. I stored it alongside my grandmother's words about the desk and Mrs. Cross's words about observers, in the same interior cabinet where I kept the things I didn't yet know how to use. In the meantime, I built something quiet. I got my freelance curriculum work steady enough to pay rent. I started writing. Not for anyone, for a Substack newsletter I published under a pen name about family systems and burnout and the specific exhaustion of being the capable one. I called it the reliable one. I never promoted it. People found it anyway. Slowly. Then not slowly at all. By the time the story I'm telling you now was unfolding, the newsletter had 18,000 subscribers. I had never told my family it existed. And then a small independent press in Asheville, Meridian Press, sent me an email asking if I had a book. I wrote back and said I was thinking about it. Let me tell you how it started. Not with a fight, with a text. Hey, Mom has her memory care evaluation on Thursday at 2. I know you work from home, so I figured you could take her? I have Ryan's hospital thing that afternoon. Let me know. Brooke sent me that message 18 months before the baby shower. I looked at it for a long time. I said yes. I always said yes. That was the first Thursday. There were many Thursdays after that. Within 6 months, I was managing our mother's memory care calendar, appointments, medication refill calls, insurance paperwork, the quarterly meetings with her care team. I had not agreed to do this. There had been no conversation. Brooke had simply identified that I had schedule flexibility and assigned. When I raised it once, gently, by text, suggesting we split the scheduling, Brooke replied, Of course. I'll take the next one, promise. She took one appointment in the following 4 months. Then she went back to the rhythm she preferred. I noticed that when Brooke mentioned me to family members or family friends, the framing was always the same. Claire doesn't have a ton going on. Or, Claire's schedule is pretty open. Or, at a cousin's birthday dinner. It just works out because Claire's remote work is flexible, said with a particular kind of smile that made remote work sound like a hobby rather than an income. I said nothing. I was, as my mother had once predicted, not making a fuss. Then I was at my mother's house one afternoon in February, sorting through a drawer of medical paperwork. My mother was napping. I was looking for her supplemental insurance card. On the kitchen counter, held down by the pepper grinder, was a piece of paper someone had printed and left behind. A group text thread. Brooke, Ryan, my mother. Recent. I stood there and read it. Brooke had written, I think it's easier not to tell Claire about the Outer Banks trip directly. She gets emotional about being included, and it's easier to just have her handle the pre-trip stuff from home where she's most useful. Ryan had replied with a laughing emoji. My mother had written, She won't make a fuss. She never does. I set the paper back down. I put the pepper grinder back on top of it. I found the insurance card. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for 22 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I pulled in, and again when I finally got out. The sun was going down, and the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the hedges. I thought about my grandmother's desk. I thought about the word useful. I thought about 18,000 people reading my essays about exactly this specific archaeology of invisibility, under a name that wasn't mine. When Brooke called me 3 days later about the beach trip, she needed me to research rental cars and compile a list of grocery stores near the house. I said, Sure, I can look into that. I had already emailed Meridian Press. I had already called Mrs. Cross. 2 weeks after that, Brooke asked me to plan her baby shower. Full coordination, venue, catering, invitations, a custom photo display of family pictures. I said yes. I had already signed the contract with Meridian. I had already booked the moving truck. The shower was scheduled for April. I used the intervening weeks to do what I do: plan carefully, work quietly, and prepare. I want to pause here and ask you something real. Have you ever done the work, carried the weight, absorbed the cost, and then watched someone else take a bow in the room you built? If that hits somewhere specific, type the word desk in the comments. I want to see how many of you are sitting with this right now. Because what happened at that shower is the part one still replays sometimes. Not with anger, with something closer to clarity. The week before the shower, I drove to Asheville. Mrs. Cross's farmhouse is set back from the road behind a long gravel drive lined with cedar trees. The porch does face the mountains, exactly as advertised. She had sweet tea on the table and asked no questions, which is one of the things I love most about her. We sat in the dark after dinner, and I finally said it out loud: the desk, the printed text thread, the years of Thursdays, the book. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what you're doing." "I think so." "Then you don't need my permission. You just needed to hear yourself say it." That night, alone in the guest room with decent light, I let myself feel all of it. Not anger. Anger would have been easier. What I felt was something more precise and more devastating. Grief for the version of myself that had believed keeping quiet was the same as keeping the peace. I cried, and then I stopped crying, and then I opened my laptop and confirmed the book deal paperwork and emailed the moving company. By the time I drove back to Ohio, I had told no one in my family about the book. I had told no one I was moving. I had planned a baby shower for my sister with the same precision I brought to everything I did, because I intended to do it beautifully. Not for Brooke, but for myself. Because I was done doing things badly on purpose. I was done performing smallness. The afternoon before the shower, I stood in the venue space, a rented room in a restaurant near Brooke's house, strung with lights I had sourced, anchored by the photo display I had assembled from 43 printed photographs, and I thought, this is the last thing. Not with drama, with finality. The way you close a door you know you won't open again. The shower was beautiful. 42 people. Finger sandwiches on slate boards. The photo display ran the length of one wall: Brooke as a baby, Brooke and Ryan's engagement, Brooke with family, Brooke and me as children, our grandmother in the background of one photo, half-turned blurred. I had found that one myself. I had included it on purpose. I wore a green dress. I stood near the food table and talked to people and smiled and refilled things when they ran low, because that is what I do. An hour into the event, Brooke stood to address the room. She is good at this. Effortlessly warm, unhurried, practiced at the cadences of gratitude without ever quite landing on the specific. She thanked her friends. She thanked Ryan. She thanked her mother-in-law. She said, "And thank you to my sister Claire, who helped set up and made brief eye contact with me before moving on." Helped set up. I watched the faces of the people near me. A woman named Gretchen, a college friend of Brooke's whom I'd spoken to earlier, glanced at me with a small, careful expression. Not pity, something more like recognition. I held her gaze for just a second and then let it go. 20 minutes later, I was near the entrance, adjusting the welcome sign, when I heard Brooke's voice carrying from behind the curtain partition. She was talking to someone, an aunt or maybe a family friend. I didn't look. She was saying, "Claire's always needed something to keep her busy. Her career never really took off the way she hoped. So this kind of thing is good for her." I straightened the sign. I turned around. The room was at its warmest moment. Conversations layered over each other, glasses raised, laughter from a corner. I walked to the center of the space. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. There's a register, measured, unhurried, carrying, that people feel in a room before they consciously hear it. I found that register. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Brooke," I said. Several conversations quieted. A few more. Then most of the room. "Before I have to head out, I wanted to share some news of my own." Brooke turned from across the room. Her smile held, polite and slightly confused. "I'm moving to Asheville next week." I've signed a contract with Meridian Press for a book of personal essays. The advance is $62,000. I said it the way you say a zip code. Just numbers and facts. The room went very still. I watched Brooke's face process it in stages. Confusion first, then something sharper, then a kind of blankness that arrived like a circuit breaker tripping. Her hand, which had been resting on the back of a chair, went still. Ryan, standing beside her, tilted his head very slightly, like a man recalculating something. Gretchen, near the food table, put down her glass and started to smile. "I'm so glad I got to celebrate this with all of you," I said. "Brooke, congratulations. You're going to be a wonderful mother." I picked up my bag from the table by the entrance. I walked out. The door closed behind me with the quiet weight of a door that fits its frame. Tell me in the comments, what do you think happened after I walked out of that room? 3 options. A. Brooke called me immediately, furious. B. Brooke said nothing for weeks, then sent a long text. C. The family closed ranks against me, and I was painted as the villain. Vote below. Because the answer involves all 3, and it also involves the desk. The first thing that happened. My phone was quiet.
For 3 days, nothing.
No call from Brooke, no call from my mother. I drove the moving truck to Asheville. I unloaded boxes into the cottage I'd rented outside the city, a small place, older, with wide plank floors and a bedroom that looked into a tree lane. I joined Mrs. Cross for dinner that Thursday. I went to sleep. On day 4, Brooke texted me. It was long. It used the word betrayal 4 times. It described what I had done at the shower as humiliating and selfish and attention-seeking. It asked how I could have used her celebration to make an announcement about myself. It did not mention the phrase "help set up." It did not mention any of the Thursdays. It did not mention the printed text thread, or the laughing emoji, or the sentence "she won't make a fuss." I read it once. I didn't respond for 2 days. While I wasn't responding, 3 things happened. The first, without me coordinating our mother's care, the scheduling quietly fell to Brooke. She called me once, in a different register than usual, practical, a little clipped, to ask if I had the name of the contact at the memory care facility. I gave it to her. That was all. 2 weeks later, she called again. This time her voice was different. Slower. "I didn't realize how much there was," she said. There was a pause. I let it exist. She didn't apologize. But she said it and I registered it. The second, people found the Substack. I'm still not sure how it accelerated when it did. These things have their own momentum. A cousin texted me. "Is this yours?" I didn't confirm it, but I didn't deny it either. Within a month, several people who knew my family had read the essays. Most recognized something in them. The essays weren't about Brooke by name. They were about patterns, systems, the physics of invisible labor in families. But patterns are recognizable. Several people who had watched my family from the outside for years texted me privately to say they had seen it too. One of Brooke's closest friends from college, someone I barely knew, sent me a 3-paragraph message that began, "I've been thinking about something for a long time, and your writing finally gave me the language for it." Brooke's carefully maintained image, warm, family-centered, the one who holds things together, began to experience a kind of quiet reappraisal in the circles she cared most about. The third thing, my mother, during a memory care visit that Brooke was now managing, had a moment of unusual clarity. Brooke mentioned the desk, maybe to fill the silence, maybe for another reason. My mother told her it had always belonged to Claire, that their grandmother had said so, and that she wanted it corrected. Brooke called me about the desk 3 weeks after that. She did not say she was sorry. She said, "Mom wants you to have the desk. I'll cover shipping if you can send me the address." I sent her the address. 6 weeks after the shower, Brooke and I spoke on the phone. A real conversation, not a text chain, not logistics. She had asked for it, which surprised me. She started with, "I'm still hurt about the shower." I said, "I know. I imagine you are." There was a pause. Then, "Did you plan it that way?" The announcement. I planned to tell people I was moving and had a book deal. I chose that moment because it was available to me and I knew everyone would be there. She was quiet for a moment. "That's honest. I've been trying to be." She asked if I was angry with her. I thought about it genuinely before I answered. I was. I don't think I am anymore. But I need you to understand, I can't keep being the person who absorbs the overflow. If we're going to have a relationship, I need it to be a relationship where you actually see my life as real. That's fair, she said.
Slowly.
Like someone learning the shape of a new word. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing. Our mother's care came up. I told Brooke I was willing to handle certain things remotely, calls, paperwork, insurance, if she would commit to the in-person appointments. She agreed. We put it in a text so we'd both have it. Before she hung up, she said, "For what it's worth, the shower was beautiful." I know, I said. I made it that way. It is 14 months later. I live in a rented cottage outside Asheville with wide plank floors and a tree lean out the bedroom window. I work mornings on my second book, a different kind of book, looser, braver. Afternoons I consult for the EdTech company, same as always, except now I set the hours. Thursday evenings I go to a writing group that meets above a coffee shop on Lexington. The people there know my real name and my pen name, and the distinction matters less than it used to. Mrs. Cross comes for dinner on Wednesdays now. She brings wine she describes as adequate and talks about books with the kind of focused joy that has always made me want to live longer. My grandmother's desk is in the corner of my office. The movers set it down carefully, and I stood there for a moment with my hand on the warped corner, on the slight rise where the wood buckled from that old water damage. It still smells faintly of cedar. The narrow drawer still holds paper, though it's my paper now, loose sheets, index cards, the notebook where I wrote down Mrs. Cross's sentence about observers. I found that notebook in a box. I put it in the desk. Last week I made dinner here. Nothing special, pasta with tomatoes from the farmer's market, wine I chose myself, and I sat at the desk afterward and wrote for 2 hours and looked up at some point and realized I was completely, genuinely content. Not happy in the performed way. Content in the structural way. Like a room that finally has the right furniture in it. Brooke and I are in contact. It is imperfect and ongoing and occasionally stilted and real. She sent a photo of the baby last month. The baby is remarkable. I told her so. I meant it. We are learning a new version of each other, carefully, with the specific caution of people who have broken something and are deciding, together, whether to repair it or replace it. I don't know how it ends. I don't need to. I have a desk now. I write at it every day. If you've watched this to the end, I think you probably already know what I'm about to say, because this story isn't really about a shower announcement, or a book deal, or even a desk. It's about what happens when the most capable person in a system finally stops subsidizing that system's failure to see her. I didn't win anything. I didn't take anything back. I simply stopped making myself small enough to fit in the space my family had assigned me, and built something at full scale instead. That's all. It turns out that's everything. If you've been the reliable one, the available one, the one who makes the calls and fills the gaps and handles the logistics and somehow never makes the guest list, I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments. Not the whole thing if you're not ready. Just one sentence. The sentence you'd say if you knew someone was finally listening. I'm listening. My name is Claire Sutton. I am 34 years old. I used to be the sister who helped set up. Now I'm the writer who built the room.